Good evening. 33 years in 31 days. What day is it? Day 11, looking at 2000, the year 2000. We got past the millennium bug. Nothing fell over. We didn't enter this zombie land of computers that just didn't know what date it was and the whole world just fell apart. You remember the furore and fuss about that? Remarkable. Anyway, the year 2000. I'm still trying to get over what I did yesterday showing that picture. Never done that. In all my years on social, have I ever done that. My children and my wife have been sacrosanct. Never. But there you go. Although you haven't seen my children. But so be it. There we go. So welcome along, replay viewers, welcome along too. Good to have you with us this evening for 33 years in 31 days, looking at the year 2000. If you've joined me over the last couple of days, you'll know that I am on the traffic unit at Greater Manchester. I'm working out of Platt Lane Police Station. That no longer exists. It's a block of flats and things, I believe, now, and has been for some time. But that's where I was. That's what I was doing. Having a great time. Really, really enjoying the role. So only no photographs for you tonight. Nothing to share with you from the year 2000. But just two things that I'm going to talk about. One of them, the fact that I'm starting to get a little bit itchy feet. And also one of the type of collisions that we deal with that are sometimes the hardest for us to sort of deal with and both personally and professionally. But there we go. So we shall start with that, and that is fail to stop collisions. This is where the driver of a vehicle is involved in a collision, and then instead of stopping at the scene and exchanging details and being there to speak to the police or whoever, whether it's just exchanging details or whether it's there to speak to the police and explain what's happened and potentially be breathalyzed and potentially be arrested or whatever, but they don't. They flee, they fail to stop, they leave the scene, and they are no longer seen. And one collision that I dealt with in 2000, which makes it even harder to deal with. There are a couple of factors that come with these. First one, it was a young boy. He was a pedestrian. He was hit by a car, and the car failed to stop. I'll make it quite clear from the start. He did not die, but he was very, very poorly at the first stages. And although we never quite got to the point of accident investigation and dealing with the scene on the basis that we thought this young lad was going to slide, it was touch and go as to whether that was going to happen. But you make an informed decision, and I have to say, I can't think of a time where we got it wrong, really. I can't think of a time where we didn't do accident investigation and then somebody died. So something must be working in your sort of sixth senses somewhere. The second thing about these that's really difficult to deal with and is because you can't give any answers to the family. You have an investigation ongoing, but if you've got a description vaguely of a car and you've got no CCTV and you've got no registration number and no witnesses and you desperately want to find the person that's done this, but you're like, I've got absolutely nothing. What can I do with this bump? And those things are really hard because families of those who've been injured want answers and they want justice and they want to know that you've found the driver. And invariably we would always say, somebody knows, not just the driver, somebody knows who the driver was and somebody knows what happened, and they're just keeping stum and not saying anything, which is an awful thing. Can potentially be an offence, assisting an offender. But This was a very difficult one to deal with because very, very poorly young boy. If I remember correctly, he was whisked off to Alder Hey Children's Hospital in Liverpool and looked after there. If he didn't go to Alder Hey, he might have gone to North Manchester Children. In fact, thinking about it, I think he went to North Manchester Children's Hospital. I think I'm thinking more along Cheshire lines with Alder Hey. He went to North Manchester Children's Hospital. That is, or was, don't know how it works now, but North Manchester Children's Hospital was probably one of the most humbling places that I have ever been to, because we all have a life and we all live it, but we've all got lots to complain about. We've all got stuff that we'll bitch about and say, this isn't right and that's not fair and I haven't got this or I need that and I can't pay for the groceries or whatever it happens to be. We've all got something that we want to complain about. And when we used to go to North Manchester Children's Hospital, you would walk in through the main entrance and down the corridors and past the wards and the wings and the rooms. And in every room and in every ward, there are really, really, really poorly kids. And families gathered around them and supporting them and keeping them entertained and keeping them occupied and living with this awful situation that nobody would wish on anybody's child. But they're there and they're dealing with it, and it suddenly brings you right back down to earth. You think, my problems and the things that I get upset about are absolutely minuscule when you walk through a children's hospital and see all those kids with all sorts of conditions and problems, and how they are facing up to their difficulties with such bravery and it just makes everything that's wrong with your life completely irrelevant. But there we go. Went down, sorted a few things out. Parents want answers, have no answers to give. This investigation went on for some time, and this young lad, Bradley, I won't say his surname, but Bradley was his first name, was a proper little trooper. He got himself back together again, got himself straight, got himself right, and was back home. I continued to investigate this collision, continued to try and find CCTV and witnesses, and continued to try to get some sort of closure for the family on the driver who just left their son for dead down this residential side street in Wythenshawe. Drew a blank, got absolutely nowhere with it, and it was really disappointing and hard to do. But you can still make a difference, and this is the wonderful thing about policing, and the wonderful thing is that I could have gone and sat with the parents and flowered up the fact that I wasn't getting anywhere with the investigation, with something will happen, we'll definitely find something and all this. I was very much an open and forthright person, and just said, I'll be quite honest with you. I have absolutely nothing to work with at the minute, and I'm trying to find stuff. And if I find stuff, I'll do my absolute utmost best to use that to best effect. But we've got nothing. The family, the parents were absolutely brilliant. Considering the circumstances, they were fully understanding of everything that was going on. They were so thrilled and delighted that Bradley had actually made this recovery. But what did make a difference? Bradley and I clicked. We got on like a house on fire. Got on really well. Used to go spend time talking to him and laughing and joking and talking with his parents, and then laughing and joking a bit more with him, and build up quite a relationship with him. He used to come out and see the traffic car when I was outside the house, and come and have a look at the traffic car and sit in, and we showed him all the buttons and radios and switches, and he could turn all the lights on and turn the sirens on, and just showing him around the car and the kit that we carry, and explaining what my job is, and so on. Absolutely loved it. And then at a later date, I arranged for him to go to the helicopter. And if you remember on one of the broadcasts, the helicopter used to be at Openshaw, but it moved to Barton Aerodrome, to a purpose-built facility, which is where the helicopters for GMP and us actually in Cheshire, but one of the helicopters is still based at Barton, with the NPAS now overseeing that rather than Forces with their own helicopters. We took him down to the helicopter. He saw the helicopter. He got to sit in the pilot seat in the helicopter. The helicopter crew and the pilot made a huge fuss of him. He had a great afternoon down there. His parents were thrilled because he was thrilled. If you're a parent yourself and you're trying to struggle to find things to do for your kids and all the rest of it, you sometimes think, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If the kids are happy, I'm happy. And so it was just perfect in that regard, because he was absolutely loving it, got spoiled rotten, really shown the helicopter and everything it was about. And so the contact with the family eventually, rightfully, has to start drawing to a close. The collision wasn't making any progress. It was quite clear we weren't going to get anywhere, and it was going to take somebody with some gumption to just stand up and say, I need to get this off my chest and tell you what happened with this collision, be that the driver or a witness. They never came forward. But that tailed off, and it was always lovely when you get a letter from somebody and they write in to the chief, or to the chief super of the division, or wherever it happens to be, that they write into and say, thank you, this officer's made a real difference. And I still have the letter. I have the letter. I meant to actually have it out, and I didn't. It's in my folder of other bits and pieces, which is now in the loft up there. I thought, I'm not going to get that tonight, but I still have the letter from his parents, just saying that how happy they were with the way that I'd managed the incident and the inquiry, and how I'd spoken and been with them, and how I'd built a relationship where Bradley considered me to be a friend. And occasionally when I talk about this story, I often wonder and think, I wonder where he is now. What's he doing now, that young lad? You think it's 20 years ago. So he's going to be 25, 26, something like that. I wonder what he's doing now. We'll never know. But amazing that you can, even when you can't get somebody up against the counter in the charge suite, or get somebody into court for doing something that is so awful. When you do something that's awful like that, and then you haven't got the courage to just go, I've got to stop. I have to stop here. I've done something stupid, whatever it is, but this is far too serious for me to be able to, I have to stop. But there are people out there with no moral fiber, with no compassion, who just think about themselves and go, I'm going to get arrested and I might go to prison, and gone. Shocking. One of the worst type of collisions to have to deal with. But there we go. The other thing really just for tonight is the fact that I mentioned that I was getting itchy feet. If you were watching last night, or you've since watched last night's broadcast, you'll know that in 1999 we moved into this house, and we moved into the village, and we've been here ever since. And by living here, I was probably closer to 40 miles than anything else away from where I was working. So it was a 40-mile trip to work and a 40-mile trip back from work. 80 miles every single shift. Now, it was my decision to move out here. It used to be a time where the chief constable had to approve where you lived. And that was because they paid what they called housing allowance. And so because they were paying a housing allowance, it meant that they had a say on where you lived. And if they thought you weren't living in the right location, they say, no, their accommodation and their housing would be questioned as to its appropriateness. And so generally you had to live within the force boundary. If you didn't live in the force boundary, well, then the general rule of thumb was that when you were claiming travelling expenses, you could only claim from the force boundary to where you worked. So if you had if you had a 40-mile journey, and 25 of those was getting to the border, and then 15 was to get to work, well, then you could only claim 15 there and back. You couldn't claim the whole lot. But it was my choice, our choice. We wanted to live in a more rural location, and that's what we did, and that's why we're still here now. However, you do start to look at it and think, at the time, my wife was working in Wilmslow, so she was doing similar sort of mileage. And there was a lot of money being spent on fuel in those days. So I thought, you know what I should do? I should transfer. I should try and transfer to GMP, from out of GMP, and I should transfer. So I took the plunge. I wrote to Cheshire. I filled in the application forms. And Lord Axminster, let's hope it does play in the conscience for the rest of their life. Because, yeah, shocking. But anyway, filled in all the forms, sorted everything out, got them submitted, and off they went to Cheshire. And I thought, I'm in the process. I'm going to transfer to Cheshire. You know, this is where I'm at, and how it's going to be. But, as the screen will tell you, there's something else about this application, because during this time, I'd been a hockey player for many years, not ice hockey, but field hockey, on grass, but then later moving on to AstroTurf. But I played hockey for many years. When I met my wife initially in 1996, I really hated running just for running's sake. I could play hockey and run around playing hockey, but running just for running, no. But her dad was a massive runner, really marathons, half marathons, off-road, on-road, the lot. And I thought, I could go for a run with him. And the first time I went for a run with him, it damn near killed me. And I was fit, but just not for that type of fitness. And so I set upon myself then, I said, right, I'm going to run, I'm going to start running, I'm going to do lots of running, and I'm going to do more running. And I suddenly got the bit between my teeth for running. Hence the wedding photograph yesterday where I'm like that, because I was running miles every week. And obviously I was really lean and 6 foot tall and dead thin with great big long legs. So it was just this great big, if I turned sideways, I'd disappear. You wouldn't see me. Anyway, all that sport and all that activity had taken its toll on my knee. And I ended up having cartilage surgery while we lived at the previous address on one knee, and then we came here and the other knee went. So I've had cartilage surgery on both knees. Took time off, recuperated, got back fit, back out, started working, and was on a 24/7 shift pattern doing what I was doing. Cheshire Police wrote to me and said, we need a letter from your doctor. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor sent them a letter, and I pushed that through, and they wrote back to me and said, we don't want you. And I looked at it and I thought, why don't they want me? I thought there was a pattern forming here because I was rejected the first time I applied to GMP and had to apply again. And now I'm being rejected by Cheshire. What's all this about? So I looked at it, and I'd read the letter that the doctor had sent to them, and he basically said, I can confirm that he's had surgery on both his knees, and blah, blah, blah. That was that. So in some regards, he'd not sold me down the river, but he hadn't really done as thorough a job as he could have done. Because he could have written, he's had surgery on his knees, he's now fully recovered, he's back on full 24/7 shift pattern, he's, jumping fences, chasing burglars, and without issue, thank you very much. But he didn't, and the application was rejected. Now, we're a little bit ahead of ourselves here, because it was I applied in 2000, but it was rejected in 2001. But I've allowed that little latitude there just to sort of cover that whole thing. And it turned out to probably be a good thing that I was rejected. But we'll cover that tomorrow on day 12 and 2001. So that's all for tonight. Nothing of any great excitement. I've been racking my brains today while I've been doing some detailing work, thinking, what else can I remember from 2000? And I can't remember. Millennium Dome, Millennium Bug. I was thinking, I think I worked the New Year's Eve on the Millennium. I seem to have a recollection that I worked it. And one of those things where everybody was pretty much called in anyway. And also my attitude at that time was, I don't have a family, I don't have kids. My wife and I have never been massively enthused about New Year anyway. So the chances were that if they needed people to work it, I would probably say, I'll do it, I don't mind. But I seem to think that I worked it. And I've got a vague recollection of being in Didsbury at midnight when the clocks turned, and having all sorts of people approaching the car, and lots of drunk women all saying, "Oh, have you got a kiss?" And you're like, "No." But anyway, that is all for tonight. Thank you for dropping in. Just a couple of things there to talk through. So thank you for joining us tonight. Hope to see you tomorrow, 33 years policing in 31 days, as we look at day 12 and 2001. So we're creeping ever closer to the latter part of my career now. By 2003, I'll have been in for 10 years. So we're nearly a third of the way into my career now as a full-time officer. So hope that you can join us tomorrow. Call me girl. Good evening, young Neil. I like you more and more every time we have a broadcast. Other than that, thank you for dropping in. Hope to see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a safe evening. I'll see you tomorrow.